City Council in order. Please rise for the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Item number 2 is the invocation. For that, our friend, Pastor Dennis Hudson. Welcome, Pastor.
Thank you. Appreciate you all. Appreciate you leading by example. I'm sorry I forgot my mask. Anyway, let's pray. Our gracious Father, we come, Lord, recognizing first of all that you are a great and mighty God, that you are in control of things, that this virus that's going around is not something you were surprised by, that you're aware of it being here, that you are a God we can turn to in times like this, that we don't have to be afraid. But Father, we also recognize that you can end it, and so we're asking that you would, that this would come to an end quickly and people would be spared, that lives would be protected. Lord, I thank you that we can come to you in times of trouble, and that you will meet our needs and you will answer our prayers. Father, this evening, we ask that you would be with this group that's charged with leading in a time like this. Give them strength. Help them to deal with the stress of decisions that have to be made in a timely fashion. Give them the wisdom to make choices that may have consequences no one wants. But Father, it's important that we have city leaders, that we have national leaders, and it's important that you guide them. So for this reason, Father, we thank you that you're here, that you will answer our prayer, and that you will bless this city. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. So I hope folks are watching. Welcome. Can y'all hear me through this? I don't know how well I sound. But welcome, folks, for coming. This is an unusual situation. We are, as you can see, spread out. We are adhering to social distancing as much as we can. We've got a reduced staff here. Public is still welcome. We also have an online option. So folks watching, if you have a question, there's a phone number for you to call if you have a question on the City Council. That number is 817-230-0327. Or you can email jengland, that's J England as in the country, at SaginawTX.org. We have a person, our city secretary is manning that as we speak. She will come in to us with any questions, comments, concerns from folks. I ask for patience from y'all, from everybody in this. This is an extraordinary situation. We may look at some kind of more automated or online type solution in the future, but for now this is our best solution. So I ask for patience from all around. We're going to do the best we can. As we move through the agenda, I will move slowly, allow for folks to comment, to call in. So please, we'll try to do business as usual, but this is not business as usual. So we will do our very best to be transparent, to do the business of the city. Unfortunately, the city has to move on. We talked about canceling this meeting, but of course, we may not be any better in 2 weeks, so do this the best we can. I would like to thank Councilmember Bighorst for our wonderful mask, homemade mask. Thank you. Thank Zoe, too. So I really appreciate that. We're doing our best. So I urge folks at home to do their best as well. So, moving forward, consent agenda. Item A is action regarding minutes of March 17th. B, meeting minutes of March 26th. C is action regarding increased general fund emergency reserve balance by $1.65 million and enterprise fund emergency balance by $50,000 to comply with the financial management policies. D is action regarding interlocal agreement with Saginaw Lake Worth Emergency Management Coordinator. I will entertain a motion or questions on consent agenda.
Mayor, sorry. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I've seen some discussion on Facebook about the transfer of money. I think people assume we're spending money, so I don't know if we need to pull that or if you can just briefly explain it and then we can pass the agenda.
Okay, so we'll pull C. That's what you like?
Yes.
Okay, so then I will entertain a motion on A, B, and D.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve A, B, and D on the agenda list.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Charlie, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Let the record reflect, if there is a quorum, we have a full house tonight. All council members are intact. If you can see them, Mary and Charles are on the far wings, but they are here as per usual, so it's we're social distancing. So back to item C, about the fund balances. For that, Finance Director Kim Quinn.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It's kind of weird standing up here and talking. It's not we're just complying with our policies. We currently have balances reserved, but I think it was last council meeting, we approved financial management policies. And so in order to comply with that, 25% of ongoing operating expenses we reserve. And so this is just bringing that up to the 25% for general fund as well as enterprise fund. So we're not spending it. What we do is we reserve it. It's still in fund balance. It's not planned on being spent. It's there for emergencies, unforeseen emergencies. And so it's just, if you will, earmarked instead of just being available for expenditure.
Thank you.
Questions for Kim? No questions, then I'll entertain a motion on 4C.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve 4C on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Valerie.
I'll second it.
Cindy, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, there are none. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Moving forward. Item 5, consideration action regarding amendment to City of Fort Worth wholesale wastewater contract related to the square. For that, Director of Public Works, Rick Trice.
He's back there.
Do I have to go get Rick?
He left.
Rick, you have the floor.
I'm sorry. I guess we're on item...
Item number 5.
Item number 5.
Wait.
You'll recall that we entered into a 380 agreement with the Square Development folks. And part of that was to provide $1 million that would be drawn down as construction and construction-related activities such as engineering agreements, et cetera, were performed. Part of this work will require an agreement for a new meter location with the City of Fort Worth. Of course, they have to enter that agreement with the City of Saginaw and not the developer, so we will simply draw down the funds for the agreement from the $1 million that was stipulated in the agreement. The amount is a little over $34,000, and that is a pro rata share. What it is the amount of flow contributed to the Dozier Creek sewer, which they just recently completed, divided by this total capacity gives you a percentage, and then we would pay that percentage of the total construction cost of that project. So that's where the $34,000 figure comes from. So if you've got any questions, try to answer those for you.
Questions for Rick? Cindy?
I was looking at the Second Amendment document that was attached to the cover sheet. And I was going to call about this yesterday and forgot. But it talks about the fourth word in the third paragraph. Talks about the Fort Worth system is shown in revised Exhibit A. but I did not see Exhibit A attached to this.
The exhibit is just the location map for all the metering stations in Saginaw, so this will be the number 5. I can provide that to the council after the meeting if you'd like to, by email.
I didn't know if
But
it contained
they
anything.
didn't provide it either when they transmitted the agreement, so. But that's what it is. It's the meter locations throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Rick? Other questions? As far as I know, I have no questions from the audience. I have not seen any yet. We're going to do a quick recap on this 380 agreement. Gabe, can you just walk us through what this is? Just a little background on this project so everybody is clear.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. If you recall, the square development is north of Walmart. Once it's built, there'll be a connecting roadway between Saginaw Boulevard and Old Decatur. The frontage on Saginaw Boulevard we anticipate will be restaurant, retail uses, and the piece to the west, fronting Old Decatur, was zoned through plan development for multifamily and office space. So it'd be really neat mixed-use development. All in further progress on the development's waiting on TxDOT for signal approval, which is in the queue to move forward, and we're hopeful that with the wastewater piece, the wastewater utilities, that'll move forward here this summer. The incentives from the city was $2 million worth of participation for infrastructure, which $1 million of that was for water, wastewater, and $1 million for the roadway impact. So I think the last, we staggered it, so it's on a reimbursement basis. They spend it, we reimburse, so we minimize our risk. And we're requiring that 2 sit-down restaurants are completed and have certificate of occupancies before we release the final $500,000 payment. So we've been trying to think, Rick, maybe before or shortly after the holidays, we've been in touch with the developers. They want to get going. They've got a lot of interest, and this is just the next piece in the puzzle.
Yeah, we'll just add to that the in your next month's meeting, your second meeting, you should see a preliminary plat for the development that's coming forward, and we're in the process of reviewing the construction plans for the facilities, community facilities, streets, storm drain, water, sewer. They intend to make this connection using Fort Worth's miscellaneous contract, which is a work order contract. That'll be an agreement that the developer will enter to with Fort Worth directly, so we won't be involved with that, other than it'll be critical to serve the sewer needs of the development. So waiting on TxDOT to finish their agreements. The stay-at-home and the virus has had an impact on their assistance there, but we're working through that also.
Any other questions for Rick? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the second amendment to the City of Fort Worth wholesale wastewater contract for the work necessary to support the square.
Thank you.
Second that.
Pat. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Thank you, Rick. Actually, you're going to sit down because I'm calling an audible. You're not up next. Bren's up. We had an executive session to discuss the Emergency Declaration Authority from Bren, but we're going to do that in here in open session, and we're going to do it right now so I can cut Bren loose. So, Bren Meredith.
Well, I don't have a formal presentation on this. I can give you my perspective on what's been happening. I'm sure you all have been keeping up to tabs on things as well. So, in the state of Texas, the governor's office, the county judge, and then the mayor all have emergency disaster declaration authority and the authority to suspend statutes and local regulations as they apply statewide. So the governor has the authority, is the only office that has the authority to suspend state statutes. And so that's why the public is still, the Open Meetings Act is still requiring that the public be permitted to attend physical meetings unless we conduct our meetings by telephone conference or by video conference. So the governor has suspended certain of the requirements for video conference meetings and telephone conference meetings. Telephone conference meetings still require that the establishment of a quorum of the members of council is either difficult or impossible. The governor did not suspend that element of a telephone conference meeting. For purposes of video conference meetings, that element does not exist, and the requirement that a quorum be physically present in one location for video conference meetings has been suspended as well. So on March 31st, the governor issued a statewide order essentially declaring that all the businesses and all the types of industry identified in the federal CISA guidelines, 15-page document, that those are all essential businesses. The governor also included in his order that religious gatherings should be done remotely or in cars, but that order left open the possibility that in-person services should still be permitted. There's litigation going on right now in Harris County because the Harris County judge has ordered that all services be conducted remotely. And so, regrettably, it's caused some confusion in terms of the conflict because the governor's order essentially says that local jurisdictions can adopt more rigorous regulations than what the governor's order provides, so long as they don't conflict with the governor's order. It's also caused some confusion with respect to the ability through a disaster declaration to close parks, because the governor's order also says that his order does not prevent the public from visiting parks. So you all may have seen that today the governor did close all state parks and historic sites, but there was some question initially as to whether or not the order would prevent the county judge or the mayor from issuing a park closure order under the disaster declaration. So cities have authority under Chapter 418, that's of the government code. That's where the governor and the county judge derive their emergency declaration orders and power. Cities also have the power, the council has the power under the health and safety code to, by ordinance, adopt regulations to address a disaster. This is sort of a fire hose of information. I want to see if there's any specific questions. The governor's disaster declaration and the county judges last until April 30th. They are subject to being extended. Ironically, the governor's prior order limited social gatherings to no more than 10. The new order removes that restriction and just simply says you should avoid social gatherings. That leaves open the question of whether the limitations on the number of people that can gather in a county order is consistent with the governor's order. I think it is, but it's left a great deal of uncertainty. Texas obviously is not one of the states that has decided at the governor's level to issue a stay-at-home or shelter-in-place order. Governor Abbott has decided that Texas is that most of the control is better suited at the local level. He's indicated that because the populations of the various counties in Texas differ wildly from one another, that a single rule is perhaps not the best idea. And so what we have is each county judge essentially deciding how best to manage the regulations, the stay-at-home orders. You all may have seen Collin County at first declared every business essential, and then Dallas County has been the most restrictive with respect to deciding which businesses are essential. The payday lender issue that we've dealt with here. The Dallas County Judge's Order specifically removes payday lenders from the definition of a financial service provider that is essential, and so the payday lenders in Dallas County have been closed for some time. But that's all been called into question now that we have a governor's order that adopts the CISA guidelines for what's essential, and they provide that financial service providers are essential, and it does not contain a carve-out for payday lenders. So I'm happy to answer any questions. It's been a very bizarre couple of weeks. I was telling Gabe in the hallway, the Denton County judge has decided that pet groomers are essential, and so it's not intuitive from county to county what might be considered an essential business. You've got the standard CISA guidelines, which are somewhat vague, honestly, but beyond that, each county judge and city could decide to add additional types of businesses to the list of essential businesses. So, in Denton County, your dog can get a haircut, but you cannot. So that's sort of left some absurd results, frankly. But with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Brent? Any attorney questions? Well, Brent, thanks for walking us through this. I know it's been complicated. I've asked you several questions, and it's been weird. I would encourage folks watching, go to the Tarrant County website. We follow the Tarrant County plan. There's a nice COVID-19 section that has the Judge Whitley's order. It's got a nice table showing what is and what is not allowed per his regulation. So that's a good place to start. Also, a lot of COVID information as well on the county website. So that's what we use. So I would encourage you to look at the Tarrant County website.
And it's definitely valuable that you declared the disaster and that the council has extended it, because at a minimum, state law requires that you declare the disaster in order to seek FEMA disaster relief funds directly. Now, obviously, we may not need that direct request, and it may be through the county, but just out of an abundance of caution, having that disaster declaration would allow us to seek the funds directly from FEMA.
Excellent. Any questions for Brent? If not, thanks, sir. We'll cut you loose.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everyone stays safe. And
you too.
I'm on my cell phone if you have any.
Thank you, Brent.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Brad.
All right, now moving forward, back to our regularly scheduled agenda. Item number 6, consideration action regarding award of contract for Bailey Boswell Road overpass. For that, Rick Trice.
Yes, sir, Mayor, Council, this is a big night. Shame we can't have more audience participation, but this is a recommendation to award the contract to Weber Construction. That may ring a bell. Weber is the contractor doing the work on FM 156 right now for the state, so they're nearby. The amount of the contract is $12,610,133.30, and that includes a 650 calendar day, so about 1 year or 9-month construction duration. I want to draw your attention to the financial impact section. The next 3 items, this one and the next 2 items on the agenda, have exactly the same language. Just projecting the shortage, there's an updated spreadsheet. I don't know if you have a copy of that or not, but that shows currently the funding gap is $816,683.12. The only agreement, we do have an outstanding agreement that still hasn't been executed that will be coming back to council. That is part of that funding gap, and that is the agreement with the UPRR. They have approved the plans, and we have $300,000 budgeted for that agreement. Just based on my conversation with UPRR, I think that number is going to come in much less for a change. It'll be a welcome a welcome change. But if I might, just because it does affect this item and the next 2, to have Gabe kind of talk to what the strategy is for funding and some of the news associated with that.
And before we go too much further, I want to reiterate the call-in number for folks at home before I forget. So if you're at home and you'd like to discuss this issue, call-in number is 817-230-0327. The email is jengland@saginawtx.org. City Secretary is manning this phone right now. She just sent me a note that she has not received anything. So please, if you have a question on this, want to discuss it, please, you can call in right now. But back to you, Gabe.
So, Mayor and Council, as Rick mentioned, currently we have a funding gap of approximately $817,000. The total project amount includes $5.5 million participation from Tarrant County. Once we received bids approximately 2 months ago, we had a meeting with Commissioner J.D. Johnson. He's expressed his interest in supporting the project to the tune of another $1 million, which would cover the funding gap. We anticipate there being some amount of unknowns related to inspection agreements that we would absorb, but the difference between the last projected budget amount for the construction contract and what we received in bids has, with the support of Commissioner Johnson, will be covered. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions. We intend, once the county disaster declarations and other more pressing matters, when they get back to regular business, that amendment from the county will be approved, and we'll have that additional $1 million from Tarrant County.
I may add just a little bit to
Sure.
that. As I mentioned, we believe the UP agreement is going to come in under the $300,000 budgeted amount. In addition to that, there's a little over $200,000 in just contingencies built into the contract in the individual line items. So there's additional money available there that would be applied if we don't use those contingencies. Of course, it's a big project and it's a long project, so you anticipate there's going to be change orders, and so that money will be needed more than likely. So with that, I guess if there's any questions.
Yeah, council questions. Who'd like to start it off? Mary, you want to start?
Yes. As most of you probably know, I have been opposed to this project, having nothing to do with the coronavirus and the pandemic that we're facing at this time. So to me, this gives us even more reason to be very hesitant to go forward with this, especially at this time. We are going to have a huge sales tax hit. If there's one word that we're hearing today, every day, several times a day from all the experts, it's uncertain. And I would agree with that word. And so I feel that, we don't know what the future holds as far as what our financial situation will be after this is over. Experts are also predicting that we may have a second wave of this in the fall and winter. So my point is that in these uncertain times, I don't think it's the time for us to go forward with a project of this financial magnitude. And to quote the sales tax experts, Zach Tax, their advice is stay fiscally conservative and limit unnecessary spending. This is a sales tax company or expert. I'm proud of the way that Saginaw handles its finances. I think we have a reputation of being, careful and not jumping into anything, that is questionable financially. And this is a time when we need great and strong leadership. So my suggestion would be, at a minimum, to table this item until such time as we have data to show us when we are back to our financial stability. And this Zach Tax article also mentions that sales tax reporting lags by 2 months. So that's another thing to consider. So, if anybody else has any comments or, would like to state how they feel about it, I'm sure Todd would recognize you.
We're going to go around the horn, let everybody have Are you done? Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mary. Cindy?
I guess my question is for Gabe. I mean, we already have the money allocated for this, correct? And I don't see, at least at the moment, that this is going to be a financial impact on us. I've talked with employees of other cities, and I know that they're already considering layoffs and things like that. How does the city of Saginaw stand at this moment?
So our sales tax receipts are delayed by 2 months. So tomorrow, actually, we will receive February collections, which will be normal. Next month is the big question because that would be the first impact of the coronavirus, and there will be some unknown impact. So I watched part of a Fort Worth City Council meeting today. The northern piece of the Kranz Farm property actually went through zoning, was approved. The city manager, who I think a lot of, David Cook, said that they're planning on a 30% hit in sales tax. Great unknown. I'm not going to speculate what our impact may be. I'm confident that it would be far less than Fort Worth because we have less retail exposure. So, and I'm only joking, but for all the times that people complain about the lack of sit-down restaurants and shopping amenities, thankfully that'll help us weather the storm. So some of our sales tax generators are still operating. Gas stations, fast food restaurants, so forth.
Toilet paper.
I'm sorry?
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper, yeah. Hopefully, with the run on toilet paper, we won't experience any declines. We've planned in our financial planning for the past 2 years to have some amount of cash in the general fund set aside, knowing that based on probable cost estimates, the bridge would be over. That amount was approximately $2.6 million. So we've set that aside and said, we're not going to touch it. That's reserved for when the bridge goes to bid. When that happened, we were over approximately $1 million, and Commissioner Johnson has, through Tarrant County participation, promised that that'll be covered, so there's no net impact. To answer your question, I don't want to speculate. Would doing a big project now that we've planned for impact our day-to-day operations? I don't think it would at all because we planned for this. We've also got partners in Tarrant County. So if we were to delay this project, I'm confident that it would be far more expensive in the future, given unknowns and given a time to bid. Just had talked with Councilmember Farr. It appears we might have hit some sort of advantageous spot in bidding where the low bidding contractor happens to be doing work near the city. We got pretty favorable pricing, and if we were to postpone to a future date, don't know that would be the case. But we're prepared with this contract. We will weather the financial storm on the operating side through the budget process, and happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Cindy, anything else? Charlie, Mr. Tucker.
Speaking along those lines, and the current contractors out working on, you said 156, and a lot of people here in Saginaw probably are asking this same question. When are they going to turn the first shovel full?
On 156?
No, on the bridge. If this is approved, when are
It's
they?
hard to say. I would anticipate that you would start seeing activity on the ground in June, sometime in June.
June?
It's going to take them time to order and also to set up their field office and to execute contracts, et cetera, work through shop drawings, things of that nature. So probably June, maybe late June.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, we all know that I'm for the bridge, so we'll just pass it to Patrick.
Mr. Farr.
Well, I chaired the committee that brought this bridge about back in 2011 and 12, and I've always been a proponent of increasing traffic flow in that part of our city and improving that corridor. I have the same concerns that Mary has in the current climate, and not just because of the possible shortage in sales tax revenue and what we might have to offset in order to maintain our current employee capacity in raising whatever other revenues are available to us outside of sales tax, which would be property tax and other things that we've discussed in the past. My concern is we have a lot of needs, and we've been talking about those needs, and one of them is a large fire station project. And what's rolling around the back of my mind is if we were to place the bridge, the fire station, Knowles, McElroy, and those projects all in the same light, where would the bridge fall in priority today? Knowing that if this does spark a recession and we have a freeze on property values, and I'm looking at our plan over the next 5 years in terms of what revenue we will need, we could probably see our tax rates go up considerably if we have a freeze in our property values. And when I say considerably, I'm talking 15, 20, 30 cents in the 2-year to 3-year outlook if this does spark a recession. And God help us if it sparks a depression. And it's not what's happening in the next 3 or 4 months. I'll put it to you this way. Linda's Hair Fashions is closed. There are 5 ladies that work there now that haven't had a paycheck in 4 weeks. They're not going to be able to pay their rent. They're not going to be able to pay for their mortgage. And before long, we're going to start seeing foreclosures. We're going to see houses back on the market. When those houses go back on the marketplace, what happens to property values? It's an immediate downturn. So what I'm concerned about is we have this looming recession, potential depression in front of us, that there are some advantages to a city in terms of bidding and getting best in the marketplace pricing. But for folks that can't pay their rent today, and for folks that can't make their payments on their house, it's going to be hard for them to hear we're going to raise their taxes instead of 40 cents to 45 cents. It would go from 40 cents to 55 cents if their property values stay the same or depress. So it's that's looming in the back of my head right now about spending this kind of money on what I would characterize as on the bubble in terms of need and want. Now, arguably, all of the things that we've talked about as a council in terms of projects, we can classify a lot of them as truly need. This one, I still consider it on the bubble, need and want, and it's significantly over budget. We've had to earmark a significant amount of money, $2.6 million for it. That $2.6 million could be diverted to something else. The money that's set aside for the bridge could be diverted to something else. And I'm very hesitant to say move forward with this project in this climate. Just am.
Mr. Beasley.
I have nothing.
I do have one other statement.
Yes, ma'am.
My biggest concern is that this bridge was voted on, and our citizens that voted on it have been waiting for it. We've done everything that we could to get the money together for it. It's going to move traffic, and I feel like if we don't do what was voted on by our citizens, how are they going to trust us the next time we vote on something? Because we'll tell them, well, it doesn't matter what you vote. This is what we want to do, and we're going to do it that way. Regardless of how many of them voted, it doesn't matter. We put it in an election, they voted on it, and that's what they wanted. And I feel like as a city council, we need to honor our citizens, because if they don't trust us, there's no sense in us being here. And that's just my thought.
Thank you, Valerie. All right, so before I go further, I want to reiterate, Call-in phone number, 817-230-0327. If you have any questions, comments, call in. City Secretary is manning the phone as we speak. Email jengland@saginaw.tx.org. I will say that over and over again so we don't forget it. Back to the bridge. I'm a big proponent of the bridge. It's been on our plate a long time. The reason it's over budget is, well, it's taken 8 years. We voted on it in 2012, I believe. Taken way too long for a variety of reasons. We're to a point where we are now. Fortunately, we've gotten increased participation from Tarrant County, from the County Commissioner J.D. Johnson, up to, assuming this last million gets approved, up to $6.5 million. That's a huge, it's a partnership. That's not a contribution, that's a partnership. I think he recognizes that this is not just a Saginaw project, it's really a regional project. It will help traffic regionally. That's why Tarrant County is participating. If we were doing this all on our own, I would agree with more what folks say about it being such a big issue for us, but we're not. We have Tarrant County as a big partner, and I appreciate their participation, but I also appreciate what it's going to mean to their folks, to us, and to them. So I think it's a great time to move forward. I think we'll get very favorable rates this summer. We move forward. I'm hopeful that construction will go quickly and on schedule, which would be a nice thing to happen, all weather concerns aside. So it's a long time coming. That being said, any other questions, any other thing we want to ask Gabe? Oh, Mary, yes, ma'am.
I have two comments, and one is kind of building on what Patrick said, just to make sure it's been stated the way I think it should be stated. And it was to Cindy's question about the money being set aside. Yes, there is money set aside. But kind of going along with what Patrick said, that money that is set aside perhaps will be needed very greatly in the future because of this pandemic. And we may wish we had that money that we have set aside at this point. Another point I have to make is this statement under background/discussion for item 6 states, in May 2013, Saginaw voters approved general obligation bonds to provide funds for the Bailey-Boswell Road overpass project. And that is actually technically an incorrect statement. The wording on the bond election only mentioned street improvements. The word overpass and the word bridge, neither of those words were included in the wording on the ballot. So my reason for bringing that up is to say, even though it only passed by, I think, 52 or 54% and very few people voted, we will never know. We will never be able to find out how many of the people who voted for it simply because they understood the great need for street improvements. They may or may not have even known about the bridge. I know it was talked about and publicized, and there was information out there about it. But since I have been on city council, I have had example after example after example where people are not aware of information that I thought everybody would know. So we don't know who knew about the bridge. We don't know why people voted for why people voted for street improvements. Some people voted for the bond simply for street improvements. Some people knew about the bridge, didn't want the bridge, knew we needed street improvements so badly, they went ahead and voted for it. So we can't ever know what the motivation was. So no, we did not make a promise to our voters to build a bridge. I just wanted to point that out. And so I would like to make a motion if nobody else wants to comment.
Well, before you do that, let's make sure anybody else wants to comment before we start motions. So you have anything else you want to comment, or you?
Well, I wanted to say that I would like to make a motion to table, but if that motion fails, then I have quite a few more comments about why I think the bridge in and of itself would be a mistake
Okay.
to construct.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody else has a comment, and I don't know if I should make an attempt to do the tabling. But
Anybody else want to comment at this point, where we are in discussing? Anybody else have a question? Mr. Farr?
I just have two follow-ups. One, and I appreciate what Valerie's saying wholeheartedly. I mean, we have to be very cautious with what we say we're going to do and following through on it. We have to be cautious about that. And I have to admit, I mean, when we did say this, and I was a huge proponent of the bridge during the time of the election, and have maintained that we have to have improved circulation in that corridor, no doubt. When we told the taxpayers about the project and the taxpayers went to the ballot box, just the comments that you've made about what's on the ballot, what was presented to the public aside, and appreciated, but setting those to the side, we told them we were going to contribute $5.1 million. We're not contributing $5.1 million. Now we're pushing close to $8 million, okay? So we told them it was going to be a $5.1 million price tag for the bridge. Now we're telling them it's going to be an $8 million price tag, and we're telling them in a very dicey economic condition that we are now almost doubling what our original contributions were going to be. Now, I'll tell you, we are not going to have this opportunity again in the near future, and probably ever again, in terms of bidder participation. We had 14 respondents, is that right?
It was quite a competitive bid.
We're not going to get that kind of response, a better response from the marketplace. And we're not going to get another partner, a better partner than what we're having in Tarrant County right now. My only concern with Tarrant County's commitment is we know that we've got at least $1.5 million in addition to their original $4 million in the bag. We feel like we've got it. We're counting on another $1 million. If that other $1 million doesn't come through, and I want everybody to understand that $1 million promise came in the midst of this COVID-19 issue. And whatever our one commissioner is saying, it's subject to the entire group of commissioners and the judge. They all have to approve that. And I can tell you right now, Glenn Whitley is not in favor of writing a bunch of checks. Okay? I'm concerned that that money's not guaranteed. And what we did tell the taxpayers at the time was going to be 5.1 million is now growing closer to 8 and could be 9 if we don't get that money from the county, and we've already approved construction. That's my worry, and not doing what we said we're going to do. We almost doubled the cost of what we said it would be. So the other follow-up is this project was plagued with delays during design. And it had nothing at all to do with what the city was doing, with what the staff was doing, with what our consultants were doing. It had everything to do with what BNSF and what UP were doing to us. And my concern is we're talking about a project that's 650 days. Rick, did they give us a daily cost for their general conditions for forced delay?
In the contract provisions for
Yes.
liquidated damages?
No. I'm talking about if they are delayed, did they give us their daily cost?
No, they did not.
Okay.
But
It's subject to negotiation. So on the light side, a project like that, $12 million project, it would not surprise me in the least if their daily cost is anything less than $2,000 a day. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And we had 48 months of delays in the design. If we have 1 year, just 12 months of delays, $365,000 times $2,000 a day, that's rapidly approaching $750,000 in cost and delay, having to do nothing with us. And what we've seen is we have seen the railroads behave in such a way we can bet on that. We can pretty much bet on it. So these conditions exist with or without these looming economic problems. They exist one way or the other. Absent the economic challenges that we're faced right now, I'd have to say this is the absolute right time to move forward with this project. But in the midst of what we're looking at, almost doubling what our original commitment was, having the risk of the railroads continuing to delay, having the risk of the county not coming forward with that last $1 million just because of circumstances, and it has nothing to do to slight them. It's just the circumstances are what they are. It's too risky. It's too risky for our taxpayers right now. And I'm not saying scratch the project. I'm saying, hey, let's wait a little bit, see what's going to happen with our sales tax stuff. If it looks like we're going to have to either lay people off or divert money from other fund balances, it sure would be nice to have that $2 million to keep our staff up over the next 18 months to 2 years. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm sorry to belabor the point. Valerie, I certainly appreciate doing what we say we're going to do. I certainly appreciate that. Mary, I appreciate your comments about what was communicated through the bond election. But I'm standing where I am just simply because we are in such unknown times right now. It's really too dicey for me to approve it.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? If not, Mary, you want to make a motion?
Yes, and if my motion fails, I would like to have the floor again to give quite a few more comments about why I feel the overpass is not appropriate for other reasons. So I would like to make a motion to table item number 6, consideration and action regarding award of contract for Bailey Boswell Road overpass, and I would like to table that for an uncertain time in the future until such time as we have data to let us understand what our financial position is.
Thank you, Mary. Is there a second? Do we have a second for the table?
I would second, but I would want to amend.
How do we do that? What would you like to amend, Mr. Farr?
I would like to put a time limit on it,
Such as?
60 days.
Mary, are you amenable to that? It's your motion.
I just want to point out that the contract provisions require the contractor to honor his prices for 60 days, so there may be a risk that the contractor could walk, but we can ask him to extend
We're right
this.
up against that window already, aren't we?
We're pretty close.
Yeah, that's what I think.
So,
Close to the 60 days, or what are we?
On the contract provision.
Yeah,
Okay.
the bid.
on the bid provisions.
The bid expires.
He has to honor his prices for 60 days, and so
It's like mid-April, isn't that when it?
I believe
Yeah.
so.
Before our
I
next
believe
council meeting, it will expire, so. So Mary, what would you like to do with your motion?
So the 60 days would be a problem for the current contractor, would not be?
The bid would
I mean,
expire.
For the current
It could
proposal.
potentially be a problem. You can get a letter to the contractor where he can extend the time period that he would honor his bid, but he's not obligated to. So,
Well, I would rather have the motion with Patrick's amendment rather than not have the motion seconded. I don't know that we will have enough data in 60 days, but I guess we could readdress it in 60 days based on what data we do have and see if we still feel like we are in a financial position of danger.
Okay, would you like to withdraw your original motion and make a new one?
Can I have a question? So,
Or can we just, can I just accept his amendment?
Here's a question.
Yeah, Charles?
so when Patrick was saying about the 60 days, the bid is going to expire by then, correct? So we have to
And
go
then
through the
do we
whole
have-
bidding process again?
Rick, do they have the choice to go higher after that?
you would have the option, if he did not want to honor his bid price, you could go down the line on the bids and see if they would honor their price, but all of those bids would have expired at that time. So your worst downside is that everybody walks away from the bid. So
And they may not come back.
So in other words, what you're saying, if we go past about the 15th of April, which is in a few days, this could theoretically cost us another $2 million.
Good.
Or save us.
We don't know. We have no
I don't know
idea.
what the bid climate is.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. We
know.
might get same bids.
Correct.
We might get different. We have no idea. But these bids could not be. They don't have to honor them after
No.
the 60 days.
No.
That's where we are.
Mary, I'll explain the reason for the 60 days. It's twofold.
Okay.
One, it gives Rick the ability to go back to the contractor with a date certain so that he can negotiate. If we go back and say it's indefinite, we don't know when it's going to happen, he's has nothing. Okay? The other thing is, since we are in a 2-month lag, it gives us the data March and April. It gives us our sales tax data for March and April. So we'll know at least what's happening. And if we haven't experienced a downtick in April, we probably didn't experience a downtick in March because we did have the great run on toilet paper. Okay? So we probably saw an uptick, if anything, in sales. But it would at least tell us a little bit, give us more tea leaves in the bottom of the glass, okay, to read in 60 days. And it will also give Gabe the opportunity to firm up that $1 million. If we can get a firm commitment on that $1 million in the next 60 days, and we know that the commissioners aren't going to pull it off the table to divert those funds somewhere else, and it's a hard number, then my mind is moving back in the direction of start. That's why I'm saying 60 days.
And could we say for the first city council meeting after 60 days? Because if we just say 60 days, would we have to have a special called meeting within 60?
I'm
on
fine
the-
with that. I'm
The
fine
first
with that.
city council meeting
Yes, ma'am.
after 60 days has
Yes, ma'am.
expired.
Okay, so
Okay,
you,
so
would
should
you,
I
would you like to
rescind?
withdraw your original motion and make a new one?
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion that we table item number 6, consideration and action regarding award of contract for Bailey Boswell Road overpass until the first city council, regularly scheduled city council meeting that will occur after 60 days has passed.
I'll
60
second.
calendar days has
All right.
passed.
Mary Patrick, second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Motion fails. All right, moving on. So, you want to discuss some more? All right, so back to the original question at hand, the bids. You want to say something else, Mary? Go ahead.
So since the table didn't pass, so now I would like to discuss the reasons, and there are many, why I feel that this project has no merit. Patrick stole a little bit of my thunder by saying, hey, I don't even know what place this is now in our list of priorities. And I would say it has no place. When this idea first was presented or first talked about seriously, and I moved here in 2006, so I think, yes, 2006. I know these types of things were discussed back at that time because I've seen emails dated 2006. And our situation and our surrounding economic development was like day and night back then compared to now. And it might have looked like a pretty good idea back then because everybody who lived on the east side of Saginaw had to come to the west side of Saginaw to do shopping inside of Saginaw. There was virtually nothing on the east side of Saginaw. The draw on the west side was Albertsons, Starbucks, and Walmart. And anybody who lived on the east side of Saginaw, unless they wanted to go, east, Beach, Western Center, all that area, they want to shop in Saginaw. It's more convenient to stay in Saginaw. They had that problem of being delayed by the trains. So what do we have now? We have 2 very new, modern, wonderful, large Kroger shopping centers, virtually feet outside of our city limits, where Fort Worth gets all that sales tax. The east side of Saginaw now has the Blue Mountain Road Kroger Shopping Center. That meets most of their needs. But if they want something more wonderful, it's not that far to go to Alliance and Presidio from the Blue Mound area. So, I mean, they have tons of shopping available to them. I understand there are people in this city that still have reasons to go back and forth across the railroad tracks. I go back and forth across the McElroy railroad tracks very often. And the way I handle that is, being an elderly woman who is afraid of freeways, I'm willing to take my chances that I won't get caught by a train. But if I'm going somewhere that I know I have to be there at a certain time, I just leave early. And I have learned to not get stressed out when I am caught by a train. I have things in my car that I can do while I'm waiting. So it is a non-issue for me. Yes, there are still people that will want to go back and forth across the railroad tracks for straight as an arrow transportation and are willing to take that gamble. But it's way less of a number of people than what existed back in 2013. So that need isn't very great, in my opinion. Certainly not great enough to spend the kind of money we're talking about spending. I know another reason why people say we need this is safety. And I have two comments to make about that. First of all, I think everybody knows, all of us are very concerned about safety. We know that's our major duty to our residents, is to see to their safety. We have 2 fire stations, one on each side. Our city is divided up into 4 sectors. We have 24/7 patrolling on each of the 4 sectors. 2 on the east side, 2 on the west side. MedStar, those units are driving around Tarrant County all the time. They park at certain locations and move where they're pretty handy. And, I think first responders have really more of an issue in arriving at the scene on time, just based on traffic, construction, wrecks, people not being willing to move over. So to me, it really seems like a pretty much of a non-issue, the safety thing. But if you are still concerned about the safety, there is a town in Collin County, Prosper, Texas, 27,000 people. They have 3 railroad intersections, just like we do. Not too long ago, they were a rural community. They are exploding population-wise, just like Saginaw. So they looked at that issue. They thought about an overpass. But in the end, they decided to go with technology rather than concrete. And they have a contract with a company, and this is already in place. And they have put 3 cameras on all 3 intersections. Wide view, live, wide view. And anybody who has access to the internet can log in to look and see, is there a train there? Is there a train within sight? The cost of that contract, they paid $16,000 up front for the installation and for the first 3 years. they spend $1,500 to $1,600 a year for maintenance. Without me even asking the question, and I will tell you who I spoke to, they gave me the information that this has been a big improvement for their first responders and for their school bus drivers, and they have very positive input from residents. So, knowing that it's not that much of a need for people to go back and forth, and knowing that this type of solution exists at a very low fraction of the cost of what we're talking about spending. The other thing is the money that we would save. Now, I'm talking now, we're not having a pandemic. My comments now are just based on the world as it, as it existed before the pandemic. The money that we would have spent on this overpass, think what we could do with it. Assuming we don't need it for for the reasons of having a recession or a depression. Rebuild McElroy as a concrete road, looking just like Bailey Boswell or Longhorn. I would much rather have that money spent for that purpose rather than an overpass that isn't needed. Now think about people that are on Bailey Boswell, whether they live in Saginaw or not, and they're either going east or west on Bailey Boswell. But their intention is to turn right or left on Saginaw Boulevard because of where they're going. They have to stay down. They don't get to use the overpass. So those millions of dollars spent on that overpass didn't help them one bit, and they still might be caught by a train. So they're saying to themselves, oh, gee, that was a big help. So, we could spend the money on knolls, on the drainage, on sidewalks all over the city, on helping pay for the new fire station. All of these lists of projects that we have that are some of them are absolutely essential, and some of them are nice to have. But we could spend that money on all kinds of either necessities or nice to haves, like another all abilities playground at Highland Station Park, a splash pad at both parks. I would not be in favor of spending any of that money until we get back to normal. So don't misunderstand me for saying, hey, let's go out and spend this money right now. No. In fact, as much as I am 100% for the new fire station, I would not suggest that we spend money on that right now. I think the times are too uncertain to be laying out any huge amounts of money for anything. But for a project like this that I don't even think is necessary, if every citizen in Saginaw knew all of the information, I don't think they would want us to spend this money for their convenience, because that is all it is for. It is for the every once in a while times that we are stuck behind a train. We all know that does not happen every time we cross the railroad tracks. I would say it happens to me maybe 5% of the time. I used to get frustrated by it. I don't anymore. I accept it as the gamble I took to go that way. Another reason I don't think it's a good idea, as I stated, we have these two competing shopping centers that are already taking sales tax away from us. They have to be. We may not be able to quantify how much money we're losing from those two shopping centers, but we know we are. So having that overpass would be saying to the world, hey, y'all, there's Kroger shopping centers on either side of this thing. You don't need to come to Saginaw. We're making it easy for you to bypass us. You can either go to the one on Bailey Boswell before you continue going east, or you can choose to go to the Kroger one, and if you're coming west, you can be gently deposited at the foot of the Kroger Shopping Center off of Old Decatur Road. There's no need for you to stop here. That's in fact what we will be saying to them. I cannot think of a reason other than inconvenience that is a valid reason, which I don't consider valid. But that's the only reason I can come up with that anyone would want to build it. And it's not worth, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. It's not worth spending that amount of money for that type of a project. I'm probably forgetting something that I'll think of when it's too late. But I think those are enough reasons right there.
Thank you, Mary. No, I appreciate that. I do take umbrage to one thing you said. You're not an elderly lady. You're ornery or feisty maybe or passionate, but not elderly. So,
Wait, I can't.
Can you hear me? Sorry. I said I take umbrage to one thing you said. You're not an elderly lady.
Oh.
You're feisty, ornery, passionate, but not elderly. So please don't characterize yourself as that. So thank you, Mary. Other folks, other comments, folks, or questions? Do you have something to add?
I do want to add just one piece of information. My partner over the airwaves texted me, and the bids expire this Saturday, the 11th.
Oh, okay.
See, you were correct, the
The
11th.
11th.
This Saturday.
4 days.
Oh.
All right. Let me give a PSA real quick. Call-in number for the council. Call-in number, you've had questions, 817-230-0327. Email jengland@saginawtx.org. That number is manned. I just got a note from Janice, no questions yet, so please, if you have a question, 817-230-0327. Yes, Mary. One more thing?
I did have another point that I did think of. Crans Farm, if that project goes through like we hope it does, that will be such a wonderful addition to our city. I know the majority of it is in Fort Worth. And to me, I think we'll have a much better chance of attracting the highest and best businesses to that project if they don't have this concrete monstrosity blocking the view of automobiles that are driving north on Saginaw Boulevard. You know, if I had a business, I wouldn't want to locate it behind this huge concrete barrier to the visibility of my business. I think that would have a negative impact on the Crans Farm people that we can attract to come there. And there may be more flexibility on ingress and egress if you don't have that overpass. Another thing about the traffic, I'm not a traffic engineer, I admit that. However, I think there's a really good chance that if that overpass is built, people who now avoid Bailey Boswell like the plague because of the railroad tracks will now say, oh, goody. And people who go to the freeway without, all the time because they don't want to deal with the railroads, people that might use one of the other east-west streets, they're going to, maybe a lot of them will now go to that overpass, and there might be huge traffic jams because of that. I don't know. It could be. So That's all I can think of right now.
Thank you, Mary. Cindy, anything else you want to add to this discussion? Okay. Mr. Tucker? Mayor Pro Tem?
No, thank you.
Mr. Farr?
No, sir.
Mr. Beasley? Okay. Y'all are easy. I had two things real quick that I forgot to mention earlier. Public safety is a big concern, as we mentioned. Our police chief has come to me and said, at some point in the future, we're going to need to look at it. Police station number 2 on the east side of the tracks. I believe if we do this bridge, we'd lessen or at least reduce the time when we'd have to do that. That might be stretched out way into the future or never. Don't know. I have heard from our police, our fire, our EMS folks that they get trapped right there at Jarvis and Bailey Boswell. You've got 3 railroad tracks. You could be trapped in there. And I heard Chief Craver said he's got trapped in there more than once, unable to move. The bridge would alleviate any of those concerns. I live on the east side of the tracks. I think I'm the only one on the council that lives on the east side, so I can speak as an east sider. I get caught by a train at that light more than, I would say, half of the time. A lot. I've spent a lot of time in front of that, waiting for cars, waiting for traffic there. I'm not the only one. A lot of folks on the east side are very frustrated with that. Additionally, with the Kranz Farm coming, and it will come, folks will dump out off Wagley Robertson onto Bailey Boswell, and they will immediately get into a traffic jam if there's not a bridge. So I think there's a lot of traffic flow, a lot of safety reasons to have the bridge. Also, with the past that we committed to this years ago, that we have a great partner in the county, and make no doubt about it. As I mentioned before, bridges are on sale right now, but this will not be forever. If we do not do the bridge project, this money goes away. This is not ours to keep for anything we want. It's bridge only. It is earmarked by the commissioner for the bridge. So if we don't use it for the bridge, we do not get to keep that. So just keep that in mind. That currently 5.5, hopefully 6.5 million if the next million is approved. So that's another piece of the puzzle there that is a factor to consider. I think that's all I've got. Anything else we need to add, staff? Gabe, you have something else?
Just a couple things to a couple points. So my understanding with the county commissioner's funds is that they're from a county-wide bond program, would require approval of the judge and the commissioner's court, but past amendments and increases in funding were at the recommendation of the county commissioner. So, can't promise that 1 million is going to happen, but no reason to believe at all.
It's my understanding that fund is for road construction
It
projects
is.
only.
It's specifically for roadway. So, let's say if we choose, if the decision was not to pursue the bridge, our bonds for this have to go to a road project. They can't go somewhere else.
Right.
Just as a matter of cash flow, because we already have bonds issued, and I appreciate Councilmember Farr's comments regarding staff. Staff wants a resolution to this just as much as anybody else because it's not, staff's lack of ability or effort or what have you that it's been delayed for so long. But for cash flow purposes, we would use bond funds first for payments. Then we would use county funds. Probably the last payments we would use is our own cash. Mm-hmm. I have no crystal ball. We're in, as we've talked, very, unprecedented times. But our cash portion now, as it stands, if we were down to remaining, $2.6 million, we're talking a year plus from now. Mm-hmm. I don't have a crystal ball, but we're not going to be in this scenario, I'm confident, in a year. So we would spend the money that already is currently available to us. So those are the only comments I had.
Thank you, Gabe. All right, if no other questions, no other comments, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I will make a motion to approve consideration and action regarding the award of the contract for the Bailey Boswell overpass.
Thank you, Valerie.
I'll second.
Charles second. Valerie made the motion. Charles second. I say that loud so Janice can hear us. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the bid contract for Bailey Boswell overpass. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Thank you. Motion passed. Let's build this bridge, Rick.
Let's get it done.
Ready.
6, item number 7, consideration and action regarding overpass agreement in Burlington Northern Santa Fe Company. Rick Trice.
Of course, related to the bridge, the overpass requires another agreement. You recall sometime before I got here 2 or 3 years ago, you entered into an agreement for the at-grade crossing. That is also part of this agreement by chapter. What this agreement does is it sets the construction and guidelines and design guidelines for the bridge. Of course, the project has been approved. The design of the project has been approved by BNSF. So that just sort of ratifies that. Also has special contract provisions for the contractor, for Weber to execute as part of our contract execution. So he's obligated to perform for BNSF. And then also sets a budget of $333,300, which is the amount that's attached to the agreement. That is based on 250 days of work that the contractor will be within the right-of-way and subject to this agreement. So, again, we recommend approval of the agreement.
Council, questions for Rick?
And I will say, Councilmember Farr, I did look back through the agreement. There are no damages, but certainly it would be bad news if something were to happen within the right-of-way. So,
All right, no other questions, and I'll entertain a motion, item number 7.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the agreement with BNSF.
Thank you, Patrick.
I'll second it.
Valerie, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Item number 7. Moving forward, item number 8. I think we got consideration action regarding individual project order with Kimley Horn Associates for Belly Bottle Bridge project. Rick Trice.
This is, you recall back when we were working with TxDOT to do the advanced funding agreement, there were budgeted funds for TxDOT to do inspection of the project at that time, and that was one of the hits that impacted the budget. They considered it an off-system, so what that means is that they were not going to provide any funds for inspection, so it requires us to fill that gap with this agreement. And so this IPO, has 3 chapters or 3 sections. First section is typical contract administration, respondents' request for information, review shop drawings, process partial pays, et cetera, et cetera. So just administration of the contract. That's 2,100. That's estimated at 2,100 hours over the 650-day construction period. The second task, or big task, is the actual inspection, field inspection, and that is 2,400 hours over the duration. That's about an average of 3.5 hours a day of inspection dedicated to the project. And those tasks 1 and 2 are on an hourly basis plus expenses, so not a lump sum. So if contract time runs over or if we run into unforeseen issues, we could be back for an amendment to the IPO. And the third task is about 1.5 years ago, we had received direction or intended to go ahead and advertise the bridge, which we did, and it was on the street for about 30, 45 days. That was anticipating that at that time, TxDOT permit, UPRR, and BNSF permits were going to be received in a timely fashion. That didn't happen, so we canceled the bid. So task 3 for $60,000 are design modifications that were required by the railroad between that time and today, and then also the bid phase services. So that's a lump sum. That's just basically to reimburse them for work that they did back then, and of course had to repeat that for this bid and award process. So that's a lot to say. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer those.
Council, questions? Questions for Rick?
I have one modification request.
Go ahead.
I would like for Kimley Horn to present monthly the progress of the work to the council, whether that be here in the person or in report form. But on that report, I'd like to know what the budget status is and whether or not the completion date moves monthly.
Do we want them to come to council every month, or what do you think?
It can be in report form, or
I would like them to come to council occasionally, but
I think they should
what
this
makes
time.
sense?
every quarter, probably a face-to-face presentation, but monthly,
A report?
a written report.
That sounds very fair. Can we do that, Rick?
Almost every.
I don't see an issue, but if Dana doesn't respond, like in the next 3 seconds, I'm going to say that will. That's
I'll answer for her. Dana's going to say yes. So she'll come
Do you
to,
hear that, Dana?
so report once a month, in person once a quarter? That sound fair?
Yeah.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. My question, Rick, is on this agreement page, I believe it's 6, services not included. We have concerns about any of those. I know some of these have been done, going to be done. I just want to make sure that none of these are, I think they're all standard, but I wanted to ask you if you had any concerns about the services not included on page 6.
I have not seen anything. I mean, that is pretty much boilerplate.
That's what I
And
thought, but-
a lot of that work is being done by the contractor. I mean, he's responsible for his staking and horizontal, vertical control,
Okay.
et cetera, so.
That's, okay. Thank you. That's was my question. Okay. All right, council, other questions? If no other questions, I'll entertain a motion on item 8.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the IPO as presented.
Thank you, Patrick. Second?
I'll second.
Charles, second. So Patrick made the motion. Charles Beasley made the second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? So that's item 8.
If I might, I'm just going to, some final comments on the last 3 items.
Sure.
Our intent is to go ahead and of course, execute the contracts and begin to mobilize for the construction. Failing an agreement with UPRR, we're going to issue a work order to the contractor to do all work except for that portion that's controlled by UPRR. So he has plenty to do. But just wanted to let you know that that's how we're going to handle that permit until we receive it.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
So
Rick.
Thank you all.
The Rick Trice Show officially concludes. Item 9, consideration action regarding Resolution 2020.11, fiscal year 2019-2020 mid-year budget revisions. For that, Finance Director Kim Quinn.
Mayor and City Council, we modify the budget 2 times, mid-year and at year-end to
All right.
true up.
Can I stop you there? I'm sorry.
Of course.
At 7:26, we're in a public hearing for this item. Go ahead.
I was going to say we must do that in the same fashion that we adopt our budget, which is by public hearing and city council approval. So the majority, I'm not going to go through line by line item. If you're so inclined, there's the actual line item changes as well as a memo explaining the changes. The majority of them are projects or items that were not purchased in the previous fiscal year that are rolled forward for funding in the current fiscal year to complete those projects. And then the other types of items that are
Keith,
items-
it's not this one yet. We're not on this item yet. Sorry.
And the other items, the other majority of the items are things that have come to council for approval but were not included as part of the budget. So this is a way to roll previously approved council items from October 1st until now into the budget. So that's all I'm going to say on the topic unless there are questions that y'all have.
Okay, council questions? Sorry, we're going to take a minute. Folks are looking through the list, so just bear with us, please.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a comment.
Sure.
It's a question
What
really
page?
not necessarily financial, it's more policy-driven. In the memorandum, there is a bullet point that says the elimination of the Economic Development Director position
Okay.
results in a savings. It's my understanding, and this just may be semantics, Gabe, can you explain, have we eliminated the Economic Development Director position and just adopted a Community Services Director position? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, so we haven't eliminated the position, so we did some musical chairs. Keith has taken on the economic development function. Since we had a vacant position, we hired one of our interns full-time as a management assistant. She's helping Janice and doing special projects, so we have the same number of FTEs, but there is a savings because of those changes.
So it's not necessarily we've not eliminated the Economic Development Director. We've consolidated.
Consolidated the duties, yeah, that's
Okay.
that's probably a fair, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that you still had a job over there. I just saw that in the report, and I was worried I wouldn't see you this evening. Good to see you.
All right, I have a question on page 3, General Escrow Fund. The Basswood Development Agreement, we're still carrying that forward? I thought we were done with that.
We just paid them. So
Okay.
it took 2 years.
All right.
We rolled it forward last year as well, so this will be the last time you see it.
Excellent, thank you. I just wanted to make sure, okay.
Can't pay without an invoice.
I was happy to see the note on here about the food truck park and farmers market. I'm hopeful it'll open one of these days.
Well, Mayor and Council, thankfully, it won't be because of, construction delays. It'll be global. So, and sidetrack, but Community Link is still advertising the farmers market food truck court. So we're all excited once the pandemic subsides to enjoy it.
Well, isn't that considered carryout?
What's that?
Isn't it considered carryout?
Carryout?
Curbside.
If you'll recall, Bryn said that the governor's order doesn't limit numbers anymore, so we could live dangerously and invite crowds. I would not recommend that.
I have confidence that it will open in 2020. That's as far as I'm going to commit to. All right, any other questions for Kim? If not, I'll entertain a motion on mid-year budget adjustments.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the mid-year budget adjustments as presented by Ms. Kim Quinn.
Thank you, Patrick.
I'll second, Mayor.
Valerie, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Item 10, update on Building Improvement Grant Program. For that, the aforementioned Keith Reinhardt, Director of Community Service and Economic Development.
Bear with me, I mess with technology.
While Keith is hooking up, call-in number once more, 817-230-0327. Any questions about the council meeting? Also, email jengland@saginaw.tx.org. I got a note from Janice, no questions yet. Also, after, if you watch this in the future, tonight we are live on April the 7th. If you watch this in the future and you want to email Janice, please go ahead and do so. She will respond to your email. You can call her as well. We will get an answer back to you, I promise. So call in number 817-230-0327. Keith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you don't mind, I'm going to lower this. My face is starting to sweat. So
Excuse me, Mayor, do we need to get out of public hearing?
oh, yeah.
Thank you, Cindy. At 7:32, we're out of public hearing. Now, item 9.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I wanted to come forward to y'all just to kind of give y'all an update on our building improvement grant. I think it's a wonderful thing that we're doing where we're able to provide matching grants to different commercial property owners and business owners that are eligible. We had one back in early March was our most recent one. But I kind of want to give you kind of a quick rundown on where we are and the good work that y'all have done. Part of my job in economic development is, as you can see, is business retention, recruiting businesses into our city, property business development, and the last one I have up there is the redevelopment of our existing centers and businesses, and that's part of what this program is. We're taking care of what we have, taking care of our existing businesses that have been here a while. Reinvestment, I refer to this as kind of a reinvestment into Saginaw, where it's not necessarily, it could be for the new businesses that come in, but this is more so for our established businesses, our mom and pop shops, the ones that help build Saginaw into where we are right now. I don't know if my wife has been watching it a lot more because she's a school teacher and she's at home right now, and I get all kinds of ideas from her. But we watch the show Fixer Upper, and it's not that what you're doing is a fixer upper, but I kind of Googled in real estate vernacular, it's to raise the property's potential value to get to a return on their investment. And renovating the imperfect and revealing them as what they were always intended to be. What you'll see in this presentation is exactly that. You're seeing some businesses that have been around here for a long time. Some of the improvements that were made are just, bam, it hits you. You can really see the improvements. And some of them are more so you don't necessarily see, but they're going to pay off in the long run. I briefly mentioned earlier what the program is. It provides the matching grants for community, commercial, neighborhood, office, professional, light, heavy, plan development. Potential for the different categories of $5,000 for facade, lighting, signage, interior renovation. If you look at all of those, I think pretty much everything's been covered so far, except for public art. If you're like me and you have one of these, I can't read that right now, but so what I've done, this is kind of, I'm blowing it up so we can, at least so I can read it, but hopefully y'all can read it too. So far, to date, the reinvestment grants that I'm talking about, the city has the grants have been $61,280 that the city has invested in our businesses. The building improvements that have been made so far are $173,441. That number is actually higher than what that says, but as of the last building improvement grant that came through, that I'm going off of that number. But I'll explain to you a little bit later how that number is actually higher. So based on those two numbers that I just said, the return on your investment is 283%. Anything over 100% is good. That's a double thumbs up there, or triple if you can do that. The first one, I think the program was developed in, I want to say it was November, December when it was approved, and our first our first grant came forward with back last summer with Community Link, where they had improvements of $18,613. It basically got the program off the ground, and like many things, if you're standing on top of a mountain and you throw a rock down, other rocks start following down. But if you're standing at the bottom of the mountain and you throw it up, it doesn't go anywhere necessarily. Nothing else happens. This is the thing that got everything rolling. The city invested $15,000 into their improvements, which they had the house demo, which was next door, loading dock, the new interior security door, and moving a fence. Which the return on your investment was 124%, which is great. I mean, anything over 100% is good. Saginaw Post Office, the second one that came around. Some of these are, like I said, are flashy. Some of them are not. But for this is, I believe, probably the original steps and the back loading deck for that post office. The back parking lot improvements. I'll see if I can scroll in here and show you a little bit better. You can see that I don't have any after photos yet, but you can kind of see some of the things that happened. The improvements made were $13,663. The city invested $5,000 into this project for a $273 return on your investment. Very much bonus there. Century 21 Alliance property. This is a great opportunity, or not opportunity, but a great example of what this program is all about. Business has been around for a little while. They painted the exterior wooden limestone pillars, which I'll show you in just a second, and repaired some water damage. Here's a photo of what it looked like before. It's a nice building. Colors-wise, it was time to update. It's kind of hard to see it. I can only scroll in so far, but the metal post there, what they did was you can see what the improvement from top to bottom. You can see where they repainted it. The post they wrapped in wood, real nice wood, stained wood, and then limestone at the bottom. It's almost a night and day appearance from that building and the improvement on that building. $12,425 worth of improvement. You invested $5,000, so 248% return on your investment, which is great. This is another one that I really like, the improvement of the business. They spent $12,792. The city invested $5,000 for a 256% return on your investment. You can see on the front right-hand side with the two front doors leading into the same spot. What he did was with a different glass front entry, creating one entry into the building, made it look significantly better, and certainly a lot more functional for him and his business. Eustis Electric, another great example of an improvement. They spent $52.50. You put in half of that for a 200% return on your investment. The existing building, you can see the parking lot, how a lot of very rock and kind of patchy of asphalt and the painting of the building. They repainted the building, looks so much better. New modern paint color. The parking lot is asphalt, looks so much nice. Much better improvement. 200% improvement or return on your investment. El Placido Salon. This is another one of those improvements you don't necessarily see when you're standing out in front, but the improvements they made were some of them to the building, the parking in the back, and then HVAC improvements. $9,600 worth, a little over $9,600 worth of improvements, and you reinvested $2,625 for a $366 return on your investment, which is great. Kirk Bonds. Sometimes when you see somebody does something or a neighbor does something to their yard or their house or whatever, you want to, I got to keep up with whatever the Joneses, if you want to refer to it that way. And in a sense, that's kind of what he did. He wanted to beautify his building to match the newer building that's just next to his, and that was next door. He spent $6,000. The city invested $3,000. 200% return on your investment. Did I skip one? No. Another great example of what this program is, and this is one of those things that you're not going to see right away. We're baseline investments in the shopping center.
Holly Center.
Yes. One of the things that they did is they improved their lighting. They replaced the existing light fixtures, the halogen or metal halide lights, with LED lightings. Yes, there's an initial cost of almost $11,900. But what they're going to, and the city invested $5,000. But what they're going to see in the short and long run is their electricity bills are going to go down significantly. The other thing it's doing, it's going to be a lot brighter light than what was there, so it's created much better safety for the patrons in the evenings. Quick Car Saginaw, they had some leaking metal roof. Kind of see a little bit of it here. After they took the damage down, $3,300 worth of damage or improvement that need to be done. You put in half for 200% return on your investment. Saginaw Nutrition updated their business signage, $2,760 for that, and city invested half, 200% improvement. Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Happens to be where I get my oil change at. They clean their Bay Area, metal rehab, waiting room, paint rehab, repair and paint, and in the bathroom. And it's one of those things when people are when they come to that building now, they're going to see these improvements and see how it looks so much nicer and cleaner, not as oily, and the walls are painted. And it looks so much better. 13,773 improvements. City put in $5,000 for a $275 return on your investment, which is great. The next two are what I would also consider as perfect examples of the definition of reinvesting in your businesses. This is one of those examples of where it's not going to show right now, but it will in the long run. This is Bud Starnes' property. Formerly Jitterbean. I was so sad when Jitterbean left because it was convenient, it was close, and they served coffee, which I happen to enjoy. One of the things he did, he's tried to put in different businesses in there, and ones that served food. He didn't have a grease trap, and it limited the type of businesses he could bring in there. So he spent the $30,350 to put in a 500-gallon grease trap. The city invested $5,000 into that for a return on your investment of 605%. 100%. What you're not, while it doesn't look like a super attractive paint job or whatever, what you're going to see in the long run is that he's going to be able to fill that business because that building's set vacant for quite a few years. And now he's going to be able to bring in businesses which will bring in sales tax and not have a vacant building sitting on our main drag that's falling in disrepair. You'll have a business in there, this is a great improvement to get that business or to get that building moving forward. Julian Lambert, professional photography. This is a Saginaw business. They were in the Southern Shopping Center. And the Vaquero property where Collections was located. Collections Jewelry. They did. This is a great example of what this program does. The building that they moved into was just right down the street, right by Awesome Blossoms flower shop. The building has been a number of things, from electric, foundation repair. I had the benefit of seeing the progress from when they moved in to where it is now. I'm an ultra marathon runner, and one of my routes that I run at lunch happens to go to Hampshire, and I cut down Hampshire and go all the way down to Longhorn and so forth. But I'd go by that building almost every day, and I could see the improvements. And sometimes Julian would say, "Come here and look. Come here and take a look at this." So I got to see from when the building was just and I'll show you a few pictures of that. There's a picture of what it looked like before, right after they power washed. You can see some of the inside pictures of the building. It was just a shell, cinder block walls, metal roof, no insulation. You can kind of see in the upper left-hand corner the plywood where they had an office and a restroom, and it was just a mess. The value on that building was only $11,000 to where it is now. And I don't have all the pictures because I'd have to take up a whole lot more pages for this. But you can see the improvement between that upper left-hand picture of the building right after it was power washed to what it looks like now. And if you haven't been inside, you need to stop by and take a look.
Well, I certainly don't want Tad to see this presentation right now.
I know. The rates just went up.
I mentioned earlier about that the percentage is actually higher than what it is, and the amount that's been improved is actually higher. When they originally submitted this grant, they had spent $33,000, which is what I presented to you back in early March, and the city reinvested $5,000. What I've been told is, and you can tell by looking at that, they've actually spent probably over $100,000 just to get the building to where it needs to be. Even at $33,000, you're looking at. Yeah, the inside is incredible from what they've done. Inside is incredible. From what they've done, it's just a 660% return on your investment. If you put in the actual numbers of what it really is, which is about, even say $100,000, this really improved the value of that. You had a vacant building worth $11,000, and they put probably close to $100,000 into the building. Goodness. That's good. Mm-hmm. Just a reminder, and here's those dollar figures, and I mentioned actually higher in two ways, which I just said. But the total return on your investment is 283%, which is outstanding, and you really need to give yourselves a pat on the back for what you're doing, because it's, bringing in new businesses is great. Developing new areas, new properties is wonderful. But taking care of redevelopment of what we already have, I think, is just as important too.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Any questions for Keith?
Very good presentation, Keith.
Any other questions for Keith? Thank you, sir.
Fine work.
I'd like
Appreciate
to
it.
make a comment.
Yes, Cindy.
She kind of went in and out of my head. First of all, Keith, thank you so much for that presentation. It was just incredible. Your passion for this city is very apparent in this. And I think that with you working with our existing businesses and bringing that information to the council for our approval, I think it's going to be attractive to new businesses. It's like, here's a city that cares about their businesses, and they're going to look out for them, whether they're, I mean, if they care enough about the old ones, you know, they're going to take care of the new ones. So thank you so much for this.
I'm moving forward. Item 11, at 7:49, we're assessing the workshop. Item 12, budget workshop, tax rate presentation. For that, Finance Director Kim Quinn. As Kim takes the dais, I will once again read out the number. Call-in number, if you have any questions, comments, 817-230-0327. 817-230-0327. Email jengland@saginaw.tx.org. Kim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Well, believe it or not, this is our first fiscal year 2021 budget workshop. So this should be an easy one. It's just informational purposes only, no decisions to be made. It's just to give you some information on the tax rate, I guess, I'll start from the beginning and give you some basics and then go into some changes that are going to take effect for this coming up fiscal year. So, not to get too basic, but I'd like to be thorough. And sometimes, you know, we think we understand something, but the more you hear it, the more we understand it. So, the tax revenue is derived by using the base times the rate. The base is the property values. We receive that information from TAD, Tarrant Appraisal District. And then the rate is what's determined by you, the City Council. If you take the total amount of taxable value times the rate that y'all approve, that's how we come up with the property tax revenue that we use for main funding source for about a third for general fund. A third of the general fund's revenue is per property tax, and 100% of debt service fund. We talk about the property tax rate, but it's actually two rates that you all adopt. The property tax rate as a whole is combined, is a combination of, we abbreviated M&O, which stands for Maintenance and Operations Tax Rate. That's the portion that goes to fund ongoing operations. That's the portion that goes to fund that goes into the general fund. And then there's the INS rate, stands for Interest and Sinking, and that is the portion that funds the debt service. So that's what pays the bonds and the certificates of obligation and the tax notes. Those are our payments for that. During the 2019 legislative session, y'all, I'm sure have heard of the Senate Bill 2. And what Senate Bill 2 did was a few things, well, quite a few things, but what I'm going to focus on here is some terminology. And pardon me if I revert back to the old terminology. I've used those terms for many, many years, but I'll try my very hardest to use the new terminology, and we will certainly use the new terminology in all our official publications. What we used to call the effective tax rate is now going to be referred to as the no new revenue tax rate. The rollback tax rate, which we used to apply an 8%, which we used to calculate with an 8% factor, is now called the voter-approved tax rate. And starting this coming up fiscal year 2021, the tax rate will apply 3.5% versus the 8% to come up with the same tax rate, which is now called the voter-approved tax rate. There are also some other changes to that, in that if you go over the voter-approved tax rate, it used to be that voters would have the right to petition to roll back the tax rate. And now if you go over the voter-approved tax rate, it's no longer, the onus is no longer on the voters. It's just an automatic election, and the election must be held on the uniform election date. And then there's a third tax rate that comes into play that we didn't used to have, and that's a de minimis tax rate. And I'll explain each of these in a little bit more detail, but the de minimis tax rate is for special taxing districts as well as cities with a population of less than 30,000. So that is eligible for the city of So to start with the no new revenue tax rate, this is important that we understand this because the other tax rates are a factor of this rate. We start with this no matter which tax rate you all end up approving. It all starts with the no new revenue tax rate. And we kind of back into the no new revenue tax rate. Basically what we're trying to do is find out the tax rate that will generate the same amount of revenue as the previous year on the same properties. Those properties are not going to be the same exact value from last year. They'll either increase or they'll decrease based on the information that we get from Tarrant Appraisal District. So the no new revenue tax rate will change depending on the value of those properties, and then we, from there, find the rate. So in other words, we know what our revenue is. We know the tax levy for the previous year. We get the base from TAD, and if you divide the base times the revenue by the base, you're going to come up with a rate. That's the rate that we use for the no new revenue tax rate, the operating portion of it, and then we add to that what's required for our debt service requirements. Sorry. So that's how we come up with the no new revenue tax rate. It's helpful to understand, and it's just basic mathematics, right? If the base increases, so if our values are going up and you're trying to get the same amount of revenue, your tax rate will go down, and vice versa. If your values are if your values decrease, which hasn't happened for quite a few years, then your tax rate would need to go up to get the same amount of revenue on the same properties. So that's the no new revenue tax rate. It's going to be calculated in the same way that it's always been calculated. We're just calling it something different. The next one is the voter approval tax rate. This is the rate that I mentioned before, used to be 8%. The voter approval tax rate will now be calculated based on the factor of 3.5%. So we're going to calculate the no new revenue tax rate, apply 3.5% to it, and then add what we need for debt service, and that's how we'll come up with this tax rate. This will be the first year that we'll have to use the 3.5% versus the 8%. And any rate adopted over this would trigger, like I mentioned before, an automatic election and would have to be held on the uniform election date. There's a new rate, and by the way, the tax, and I'll mention this a little bit later when we compare the different tax rates, but there is also timing differences based on which tax rate we're going to use. So the budget calendar is based on a tax rate of the voter-approved tax rate or just under the voter-approved tax rate. And we could use our same budget calendar where we approve the budget and tax rate in mid-September. If we go with a de minimis tax rate, which we are eligible to do, it accelerates the calendar quite a bit. So something to keep in mind as we're working through the summer and the different budget workshops and issues that we may face.
Accelerates the budget, how much? Like, what we're talking?
So if we were to go with a de minimis tax rate, we would need to adopt the budget by mid-August instead of mid-September.
Okay.
And that, so if you consider that we don't get our certified values until July 25th and say have to adopt the budget and tax rate in the second week in August, we're going to have to work pretty hard to make sure we've got all of our issues decided and a lot of information digested so that we can move right along to do that. So something to keep in mind. The de minimis tax rate is basically, again, we start with the no new revenue M&O tax rate, and then you apply a rate that will generate an additional $500,000 for operating. And then, as always, you add to the M&O rate the amount required for debt service, the INS rate. So as I mentioned before, there's a different timetable required if we were to entertain doing the de minimis tax rate. And there's also, depending on how the numbers work out, and it's really too soon to tell because we haven't even received our first values from TAD yet, but you also have to compare your de minimis tax rate to the 8%. So, and depending on that, you would either be required to have an automatic election if you went over that. If the rate was higher than 8%, then it wouldn't be an automatic election, but the voters could petition for an election. So I would imagine that if you were entertaining the thought of the de minimis tax rate, you would want to make sure that it was the de minimis tax rate, but under the 8%.
And I might not be understanding this, but
Okay.
let's say so we could reduce the 500,000 to whatever amount would not make us have an election.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, so we would calculate the de minimis tax rate. We would advertise, kind of like we did last year, right? We advertised at the rollback tax rate, but we ended up somewhere between the no new revenue tax rate and the voter approved tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it's going to take a while.
So if the 500,000 would cause us to have an election, then we could lower that to whatever amount would not cause us to have an election.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. You always have the option, and the reason that you don't want to, you can advertise at what you think your highest might be, and you can always come down without having to start the whole process over. But if you advertised a rate and decided, no, I want to increase the tax rate, then that starts the clock over, and you've got to re-advertise and go through all of the public hearings and things again.
Okay.
Okay, so that was pretty much my presentation until just a couple weeks ago. But with the disaster declaration, the governor has declared the state of Texas a disaster area with the COVID-19 pandemic. So the rules are going to be different for next year and possibly 2 years after that, depending on how our values come in. So what we'll do is compare values before the disaster declaration, and then we can do that for 3 years and compare it, and then and depending on how those come out, we may be eligible to do that for a total of 3 years. But for sure, we would have that option in this coming year, and that would basically let us consider a tax rate the old way of doing things with the 8% factor. If this is something that the City Council would consider as we go through the summer and start talking about that, the City Council would just need to direct staff that this is what we're considering doing due to the disaster declaration, that we want to consider the no new revenue tax rate with the 8% factor. Again, like Mary was saying, you could start there if you wished, and then always advertise. You would direct the staff to calculate that, and then you could always come down from that. And this rate, we could follow the same budget calendar. It's not at the accelerated budget calendar like the de minimis tax rate would be.
Okay, I know we get the final numbers from TAD in July. When do we get an estimate, though? Don't we get something earlier?
We'll get our first estimate the end of April.
Okay.
The first estimates are usually pretty poor, and I have some information from TAD just in these last few days. The chief appraiser, Jeff Law, has indicated that the timeline will probably lag by 15 days. Now, he'll still have to certify, and normally he certifies at 95%. By law, they can certify at 90%, but with the current conditions, he may be able to certify an estimate. So, the situation is what the situation is, and that may have to happen. But the more uncertain and the more uncertain it is, the more uncertain our tax levy will be.
You said 15 days. You mean 15 days would go beyond the July date?
No, he'll still have to certify something on July 25th. But what I mean is, if he sends out the notifications 15 days late, then the protests can go on for 15 days later than normal, so they may go into mid-June, which means our June estimates may not be as good as we would hope that they are. Okay. So we're making decisions and estimates based on the values throughout the summer. Usually by June, we have a pretty good idea of where they're going to end up, but if people don't start protesting or have a larger window to protest, then the values are just more uncertain. We don't know. We just don't know what the values will end up. So does that make sense? Okay.
Yep.
So that is another option. And this last page, I'm not going to go through these numbers because I know not everybody is a numbers person like I am and wants to get into the nitty-gritty. But I did want to say that, as always, Gabe and I are available to speak one-on-one if you've got more questions or really want to get into more details of this. I just did this table and included it as a comparison. And I have a disclaimer at the bottom. There's actually a lot more pieces to this puzzle. I tried to simplify it just to explain the general concepts of how the tax rate works. But even if we came up with these same exact assumptions, the 4% growth rate, the $50 million in new tax revenue or new tax base, and our debt rate to stay the same, I can guarantee you it's not going to come out to that exact tax rate. It's a simplified version here. But what I tried to do is show that first column is the current tax rate, current values, and then if we apply the 4% growth factor and the $50,000 in new value, which is a total estimate at this point, it shows what the no new revenue tax rate would be, the voter approval tax rate at the 3.5%, the de minimis tax rate, and then the no new revenue tax rate at 8%. I showed the simplistic calculations with the revenues, the projected tax revenues. The next section there is the increase. I've got the dates. So all of the dates, the only tax rate that would require us to change our budget calendar would be the de minimis tax rate. As I mentioned before, we would have to accelerate. And then I showed the impact of an average homeowner. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Did Mary have a question?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say, related to the current fiscal year, we've had discussions in light of current events to be very careful with our currently budgeted expenditures. So our recently approved financial management policies kind of outlines the order of operations when we are in challenging times. So some of the things we've talked about are holding some positions that are currently vacant open. The reality for us is during the order, we're not going to hire anybody in the next month or even 2 months, more than likely. Present some savings. Other kind of market-related things, fuel happens to be very cheap, which is good and bad. Unfortunately, in Texas, we're going to feel those effects due to the economic impact, but we're taking a close look at that, and we will tighten the belt until we have better information here in the next few months.
As we talked about earlier with sales tax, we're just tomorrow we'll get our February, then we won't feel the full effect, or we won't see the full month until June. So we'll be into budget season, before we really know that. The other thing that I want to mention, not to get too much into the weeds, but The Tarrant Appraisal District is supposed to value the properties as of January 1st of 2020. But, this is an unprecedented time. We don't know. Maybe they're going to make adjustments for the situation that we're all in. So it's just hard to say where we'll end up. So not only could the timing of it be affected, but values could be affected too.
And it's not, no one in this room can say whether or not we're going to hit this $50 million target in terms of revenue increase at this, or valuation increase at this point.
You're right, and that's added value. I'm reasonably confident in that because that was about the same amount that we saw on the residential side last year, and I think we have just as much residential property
Closing?
on the books again this year. But you're right, it's a crystal ball. I mean, we try to make pretty safe assumptions, but no one knows for sure.
So this is probably one of the most handy tools that I've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at where we would be in this worksheet versus where we would plan to be, where we had planned to be, if we stuck with the no new revenue rate, we would be pretty close to our target just in new properties. Close to our target now without having to raise the rate at all, essentially, or raise revenue other than our new properties, if we stuck to that. What I would like for all of us to start thinking about, and in all seriousness, if we do have a shortfall in our sales tax, and it's significant, and we do see TAD make a audible adjustment to say, hey, look, we probably aren't going to do the 10% incremental increase across the board as we've done the last 3 years. We're probably going to do maybe a 2 or a 3% increase. If we see that, we should really be cautious about how much we move that revenue amount from this year, from last year from this year to the next year. The reason I say is if we do just the de minimis rate increase, that would put us on target for a revenue increase equal to 2022. So it'd be equal to 2 years worth of our projected revenue increases in a single year, what we were projecting in our long-range financial plan. Okay?
There's a couple of other things to consider. Y'all approved partial funding for 3 positions. So we're going to start off about $100,000 that we're going to need in addition just to fully fund those positions. Mm-hmm. On the positive side, sales tax year-to-date is up 12% from last year. So depending on how long this goes on, it may, I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily have to be the very worst scenario. Mm-hmm. We're sitting pretty good right now, and we've already started mitigating factors. We're going to manage the vacant positions, and there's some other things that we can do. So we'd rather do smaller things for a longer period of time than something abrupt to just have to cut out. So that's the strategy.
But it is very tempting with the governor putting this out there on the table for us to take advantage of these things. And I think the de minimis approach applies from here on out, at least through this legislative session.
Yes.
So it's not just related to COVID-19.
It's in the law, right?
It's in the law.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right. The last column is the disaster declaration scenario.
And that's actually less of a revenue generator than the de minimis.
Yes, and we would want to go, so we could calculate at the de minimis, but we would not want to adopt a rate over the 8%, over the disaster declaration column. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes,
Ma'am.
Mary.
Don't know if I can express this correctly because I'm confused. But the de minimis 500,000 compared to, is everyone going to get to do the 8% if they want to or if they need to? Is that set in stone yet?
It will be up to each taxing
They
entity.
have the ability.
Yes, because the governor declared it statewide.
So in any given city's particular situation, that is 30,000 population or less who can do the de minimis, or whoever gets to do that, compared to the 8%, would that have something to do with, you would have to calculate that based on the value of all of our properties? In other words, we might raise more by using the de minimis than the 8%, or not ever.
It's going to depend on what our valuations are.
But it could go either way.
It could.
Okay.
It could. The de minimis could be more or less than the 8%. In this scenario, it ends up being a little bit more, but it may not when we get our actual values and do the actual calculation.
So if we could find out in time that it would not be advantageous for us to do the de minimis compared to the 8%, not that we would go up that far, then we could buy ourselves more time. But could we find that out fast enough to know whether or not to do that?
You could direct staff to do both, and we could do both. The only, I guess, thing that I would say is that we need to be mindful to be making decisions as we go along throughout the summer if you're entertaining the idea of the de minimis tax rate just because of the accelerated time frame. So we would have scenarios perhaps for you or things to choose from, and those decisions would need to be made pretty quickly.
So I think we should try to do it that fast in case it's advantageous to us to use the de minimis.
And we'll keep you posted as we get estimates throughout the summer. And again, this is just informational purposes only, and for discussion, you'll have plenty of time to deliberate and consider. And as I mentioned before, we're happy to talk one-on-one with you and explain all the ins and outs. Any more questions?
Any questions for Kim? Thank you, Kim. Good information as always.
Thanks.
Thank you for keeping on top of this. Folks in the audience, folks that are listening in the audience, please, if you have questions about this, please let us know. One more time, the call-in number is 817-230-0327. So if you have any questions, this is all draft at this point. So at 8:16, we are reconvening back in regular session. Executive session is not required, so I will move adjourn. Patrick, Valerie, all those in favor? At 8:17, we are adjourned. Thank you, folks.